Kollaa, Finland. December 1939. A Soviet platoon advances through deep snow, rifles gripped tightly, eyes fixed ahead. The lead soldier suddenly collapses. His comrades halt, and before they can react, another falls. Then a third. The chaotic crunch of boots on snow echoes as the entire platoon tries to locate the source of the attack. But all around them stretches only an endless expanse of white. They spin in circles, rifles raised, waiting for a figure to emerge. But there is nothing except flat, silent ground. An officer at the rear scans the surroundings, then whispers to the man beside him. The White Death. The younger soldiers have never heard the name, but the survivors from earlier battles know it. A sniper who never reveals his position. Not far away, beneath a low snow mound, a man lies prone, his mouth full of snow to prevent warm breath from betraying him. His hands grip an MS-2830 rifle, eyes locked on targets, just appearing among distant trees. His name is Simo Heihei, a farmer who has spent his entire life in the northern forests. At 34 years old on that morning, in just a few minutes, he halts the advance of an entire unit. Throughout the Winter War, he repeats this again and again, until more than 500 Soviet soldiers lie dead on the frozen ground, and it all begins in this moment. One man, amid the white snow, enough to stop an army marching toward the borders of his homeland. Simo Heihei was born on December 17, 1905, in WWII, a poor rural area, with only about 300 households, located right on Finland's eastern border. His family lived off farming a plot of less than 2 hectares, and relied on the forest to survive. From 1912, at age 17, Simo followed his father into the woods to set traps and track animals. By 1917, he taught himself long-distance skiing to move quickly through the forests, and at age 12, he acquired his first rifle, an old Mosin Nagant bought from a veteran of Finland's 1918 Civil War. Simo spent hours each day practicing shooting at small targets, placed 150, 200 meters away. Long hunts in the snow trained him to breathe slowly, keep his body steady, and wait for the exact right moment. In the Heihei family, no one wasted time complaining about hardship. Everyone focused on the work that needed to be done. Finns have a philosophy: action matters more than words. Simo grew up with that mindset, treating silence as a natural habit. No one in the village of fewer than 1,000 people imagined that the skinny boy who spent his childhood lying in wait behind pine trees would 3 decades later become the terror of the Soviet Red Army. On November 30, 1939, at 6 a.m., the first explosions rang out in eastern Finland. That was the moment the Soviet Union officially launched its invasion, with an estimated force of over 1 million soldiers spread across the entire border, along with thousands of T-26 tanks and heavy artillery, meant to sweep away all resistance. The entire country had only about 32,000 troops on the front lines to face this massive steel storm. News reached WWII within hours. Many towns had been bombed, dozens of civilians killed, and defensive units pushed back on the very first day. People hurriedly fled their homes, taking clothes, a few belongings, and the fear of what was coming. Meanwhile, internal army reports noted severe equipment shortages. Many Finnish units were issued uniforms more than 10 years old, pre-torn cold weather boots, food insufficient for even a week of fighting, and ammunition so limited that each soldier had fewer than 100 rounds. Reserve forces had to bring their own hunting rifles or old guns to make up for the shortage of military rifles. Simo Heihei received his mobilization order on November 30th, and joined the 34th Field Infantry Regiment, without a moment's hesitation. The unit was quickly deployed toward Kollaa, a region of forest and snowy hills connecting towns under pressure from regiment-sized attacks. When Simo reached the front in early December, he found war unlike anything he had experienced in the forest. Nighttime temperatures dropped to -35 degrees Celsius. Sometimes nearing -40 degrees Celsius. Many young soldiers passed out from the cold, before even reaching combat. On the way to defensive positions, He passed hastily abandoned sleds and uniforms frozen stiff on soldiers who had collapsed from exhaustion. Every unit was short of everything: blankets, medicine, anti-tank weapons, artillery. Some squads had to share single boxes of ammunition. At Kollaa, Soviet corpses lay scattered along engagement points, frozen solid within hours. War did not resemble deer hunts in the forest. It smelled of gunpowder, frozen flesh, metal, and defeat. In those first days, Simo watched comrades wounded and killed right in front of him. One was pierced through the chest by shrapnel while trying to start a fire. Another collapsed mid-ski, not from bullets, but because the biting cold overwhelmed his body. He saw an 18-year-old soldier, who had spoken about his family the night before, lying motionless beside a supply route. Those deaths made Simo understand that this was no longer a war of professional soldiers. It was a war of farmers, hunters, students, people who had only one choice: stand or be swept away. And from that moment the world he had known, forest, snow, silence, suddenly became a bloody battlefield. Kollaa, in early December 1939, was where Finnish recruits first faced a war beyond imagination. During initial shooting drills, Simo Heihe drew attention for his focus. A lieutenant noted that the man from WWII maintained steady fire in temperatures tens of degrees below zero. That was enough for them to consider him for a special role sniper. When asked if he was willing to try, Simo simply replied, "If that's how I can help my country, I'll do it." Nothing more. To evaluate his ability, superiors put him through a series of tests for the most promising candidates. The first was lying prone in snow for hours without changing position. A group of nearly 10 men was tested. Most lasted about 40 minutes before lips went numb and hands stiffened. Simo lasted over 4 hours, and only stood when ordered. Next was shooting fleeting targets at 150 meters. Many missed or reacted slowly. Simo hit with his first shot. When targets were moved to 200, then 250 meters, the result remained the same. Officers increased difficulty by requiring shots from the lowest possible position. Simo complied without hesitation. Complied without hesitation. Lying flat against the ground was how he had hunted for 20 years. The final test was a mock ambush. Selected candidates had to take position in the afternoon and wait until late evening. When the evaluation team searched for Simo, it took them time to spot him right in front of them, his body covered in a thin layer of snow from waiting so long. After the tests, the decision was made: Simo would be the sniper for the 34th Battalion. When issued weapons, he immediately chose the M/2830 with iron sights instead of optical scopes. His simple reason: scopes could reflect light. He wanted to eliminate any sign that might reveal his position. That choice went against most training standards of the time, but it fit his view of the battlefield. A contest where the one who leaves a trace first loses. From then on, Simo developed his own methods. He dug shallow pits in front of his firing position to deflect the hot air when firing, preventing muzzle flash from creating unnatural shapes in the cold. He wore thick gloves to steady the stock in temperatures below -30 degrees Celsius. He compacted the snow in front of him into solid blocks to reduce recoil disturbance when the barrel heated. All were habits accumulated by a hunter entering war. When he began real missions, Simo stuck to the tactic he considered most effective: shoot one target, then immediately relocate. Soviet units often counterfired, based on the direction of shots. A few seconds delay could place him in an artillery barrage zone. So after each mission, he skied to a new position, ensuring no one could find the old one. In the 34th Battalion's early reports, his name appeared with rapidly increasing frequency. Within 1 week of his new role, Simo had more confirmed kills than anyone else in the unit. Commanders assessed that his quiet demeanor, cold tolerance, and hunting skills made him superior. Simo himself offered no comment on the results. He only wrote in his notebook, "Mission accomplished." Becoming a sniper carried no promise of safety or reward. Snipers operated alone, faced high risk, and had almost no chance of support if discovered. But for Simo, it was the task that needed doing. and that was enough. He stepped into the role with the attitude of someone accustomed to relying on skill rather than words. From a farmer tied to the forests of WWII, he became the soldier the 34th Battalion sent on the toughest missions. That choice made him leave the peaceful life he had before the war, and enter a path few could travel as far as he did. After becoming a sniper, Simo Heihe devoted all his spare time to refining every smallest detail. He began with breath control. In temperatures tens of degrees below zero, even one strong exhale could create a visible white plume. So whenever he took position, he put a handful of snow in his mouth to keep it cold, ensuring exhaled breath remained invisible. Next was managing reflections. A face could stand out when light hit it, especially against snow. He rubbed cold water or melted snow evenly across his face until the skin paled and frosted over, blending into the surroundings. Then came weapon stability. Loose snow caused excessive vibration, so he compacted the snow in front of him into a solid platform for a fixed rest. For each firing position, he dug a shallow pit directly ahead to conceal the heat escaping the muzzle. All these steps formed a simple but highly effective routine. His first real ambush took place in early December. A Soviet reconnaissance group entered the forest near the 34th Battalion's defensive line. Simo was tasked with monitoring from afar. He arrived hours early, compacted snow, readied his rifle, and waited. When 6 Soviet soldiers came into view, he did not fire immediately. After a few seconds of observation, he selected the last man in the column and fired a clean shot. The soldier fell. The remaining group reacted slowly, unable to pinpoint the direction. Simo shifted to another target. Second shot, third, fourth, spaced only tens of seconds apart. When the last man collapsed, no one in the group knew where the bullets had come from. After that mission, Soviet units reported encountering a sniper but could not locate him, hear the shots clearly, or find ski tracks. The information spread quickly. From then on, Simo further refined his skills. He relocated immediately after firing to avoid counter-battery fire. When Soviet artillery shelled suspected sniper areas, he was already gone. He adjusted for wind direction, listened to footsteps on snow to gauge speed and movement, skills gained from decades of hunting. When enemies moved in single file, he targeted the second or third man to cause confusion. When they advanced abreast, he picked the flank man to force the group to contract. Soviet units in the north began speaking of a name they had never seen. Belaya Smrt, the White Death. At first it was just rumor from survivors. Then it became official reports from reconnaissance companies. They described a sniper engaging from over 150 meters with unnatural accuracy, who vanished immediately afterward. Simo paid no attention to the nickname. He only noted in his notebook, date, wind from the east, distance, mission complete. But the numbers rose daily. After 3 weeks, confirmed kills exceeded 50. By the 5th week, he passed 80. By the end of December, many Soviet platoons altered routes simply because they believed he was waiting ahead. Simo's evolution came from his approach to the battlefield. No rigid patterns, only what made sense. He held snow in his mouth to hide breath. He frosted his face to eliminate shine. He compacted snow to reduce recoil. He dug pits to conceal muzzle heat. Every action served one goal: shoot and disappear. When the 34th Battalion commanders evaluated his combat effectiveness in early January 1940, they recorded that he alone had stopped numerous small Soviet breakthroughs. Each eliminated target altered the enemy's advance rhythm, and for the Soviets, the White Death was no longer baseless rumor. It was a sign that a sniper was tracking their every move. In every report, one note repeated: Soviet soldiers did not fear bullets. They feared the silence. In early January 1940, at Kollaa, temperatures plunged to nearly -40 degrees Celsius, visibility limited by thick frost fog. This was the period when the Soviet Union launched its strongest assault on the line held by the 34th Battalion. Soviet infantry advanced in waves, each only tens of meters apart, while artillery pounded from before dawn. Simo Heihe left camp before sunrise, skiing to a high position overlooking the narrow valley where the enemy was expected. He prepared the snow base, rested his M/2830 on compacted snow, and waited in silence. Around 8 a.m., the first infantry wave entered his range. The Soviet soldiers moved slowly to avoid lingering shell craters, unaware someone was watching every step. Simo selected the nearest target and fired cleanly. The soldier fell. Minutes later, a second dropped. Then a third. Panic began spreading through the formation, and within an hour, 7 men were removed from the line. Soviet artillery concentrated fire on what they believed was the origin point. But by the time shells landed, Simo had skied to a new position and resumed observation from a different angle. Near noon, the second wave appeared with more officers. As the lead officer gave a command, he was hit instantly. The 2 men behind him fell right after. The remainder scattered trying to locate the shooter, but subsequent shots came too fast and accurately for them to react. By early afternoon, Simo had added nearly 10 more targets. At that point, the Soviets sent elite counter-snipers, equipped with good scopes and thorough training. They flanked the hill, searching for traces. But Simo had chosen the area because of its hard snow patches that blended perfectly. He heard boots crunching from afar, determined direction, and waited for the exact moment a figure appeared behind a tree. One single bullet, then a second man, then a third. By late afternoon, the entire counter-sniper team did not return. Word spread through Soviet regiments that a Finnish sniper was blocking the Kollaa advance with accuracy beyond their data. Meanwhile, in the Finnish rear, rumors of Simo's achievements spread fast. Some units said he had passed 100 targets. Soldiers farther back whispered that hearing a single shot from the Kollaa forest likely meant a bullet from the farmer from Rotjärvi. But for Simo, that day was like any other. He kept watching, calculating, firing when the moment was right. By late afternoon, the third and largest wave of the day appeared on the valley's right flank. Simo quickly relocated to a sparse wooded section. Range was now nearly 200 meters, crosswind blowing, yet he maintained steady fire. The first man fell while running. The second and third collapsed while seeking cover. Within an hour, 5 more were eliminated. By sunset, Simo's count for the day reached 25. That total was recorded by those who inspected the battlefield after the fighting paused. That very night, the Soviets posted a large bounty for anyone who could kill the sniper. The reward was rumored to equal many months' officer pay. Some said even higher, but the bounty changed nothing. Counter-sniper teams sent out still ended up in places Simo had occupied only minutes earlier. When he returned to camp that night, comrades saw only a man covered in frost, clutching his old rifle. When asked how long he had been out, Simo replied, "Since morning." No further details. For many at Kollaa, that day proved their line still held. For the Soviets, it was a reminder they faced an opponent. Battlefield reports called extremely difficult to approach and extremely difficult to detect. For Simo, it was just another day of war. Nothing more. He did not record the count. He did not congratulate himself. He simply took fresh ammunition, adjusted his coat straps and prepared for the next day. In the report sent to command that evening, a Finnish officer wrote one short line describing what everyone had witnessed at Kollaa. Every bullet is a decision. Every decision is a life. On March 6, 1940, the Soviet army launched a major assault on the Kollaa defensive line. It was the heaviest attack in weeks, with artillery pounding every position suspected of harboring Finnish snipers. Simo Heihe had been out since before dawn, holding position at the forest edge he frequently used. As he adjusted his aim, a group of Soviet soldiers advanced much closer than expected. Among them was one armed with an explosive bullet, designed to detonate on impact. The round struck the left side of Simo's face, blowing apart his jaw and cheek, and he collapsed instantly. Nearby comrades witnessed it, and believed he was dead. They carried his body to the collection point, where the fallen were gathered for transport. When a young soldier bent down to cover him with a blanket, he noticed the chest faintly rising and falling. He called 2 others, pulled Simo from the pile of bodies, and loaded him onto a sled for the field aid station. There, the doctor recorded that his face was severely destroyed, but he still had a chance if transferred quickly. Simo was moved farther rear to a larger hospital, then to a major facility in the west. He remained unconscious for 11 days. Doctors did not know if he would wake. But on March 13, 1940, the day the Moscow Peace Treaty took effect, ending the Winter War, he opened his eyes. When a nurse told him the war was over, he only stared at the ceiling, saying nothing. Only when a doctor held up a mirror did he see his condition. Nearly the entire left jaw gone, cheek deformed, lips deeply torn, facial muscles heavily swollen. It was no longer the face he had seen for 34 years. The following days were a prolonged ordeal of pain. Simo had to relearn swallowing, eating, speaking. His voice was completely altered, weak and hard to understand. When a nurse asked if he was okay, he only nodded because speaking hurt too much. But what silenced him most was not the shattered tissue. It was the emptiness when fragments of memory from Kollaa returned unbidden. Artillery blasts, running footsteps, moments he squeezed the trigger, faces he saw for only seconds before they vanished. At night he often woke abruptly without explaining why. Nurses noted he would open his eyes suddenly, looking around as if still lying in the snow. Back then, no one called it PTSD, but everyone knew it was the aftermath survivors carried. For weeks, he asked almost nothing about himself, only about his unit. Is Kollaa still holding? And how many made it back? Visitors said that although his face was destroyed, his eyes retained their old calm, but now with a weariness no one could describe. When Simo was strong enough to stand, doctors allowed a few steps each day. He moved slowly, holding his hand to his cheek to ease pain. Someone asked if he felt lucky to have survived. He answered, "I did my duty, nothing more." In the months that followed, wounds healed but left permanent disfigurement. He was offered discharge for full recovery. It was not a choice. It was the only thing he could do. When he left the hospital at the end of 1940, Simo carried a new face, a new voice, and memories he could not set down. No more wind at Kollaa, no more familiar rifle rhythm, only the silence of a small room where he had to learn to live again from scratch. He survived. But the price was the rest of his life. After many months of treatment and recovery, Simo Haitu's face gradually healed, with distorted features that medicine of the time could not fully correct. He was discharged at the end of 1940, and returned to WWII, to the small wooden house where he had spent his childhood. The war was over, but his life did not return to what it had been. Everything moved slowly. He learned to speak with his new voice, to eat with what remained of his jaw, to cover the side of his face with his hand when meeting strangers, so as not to startle them. But deep down, he remained the farmer of a northern forest region. As his health improved, he returned to familiar work, raising livestock, hunting moose, setting traps, repairing barns. That was the only world where he could fit without having to explain anything. Occasionally, locals visited, bringing questions about what he had done at Kollaa. He always answered the same: "I just did what I was assigned." He never mentioned the days he held the line almost single-handedly, nor did he speak of the number he had killed. When a reporter requested an interview in 1957, Simo said he had nothing to tell. "The war is past," he said. "Talking about it only brings it back." To many Finns he was a living legend of the Winter War, but to himself, life after the war was simply living. He avoided public events, award ceremonies, and spent most of his time in the forest, where footsteps on snow were the only sound he found comforting. For years he lived quietly like that, hunting in winter, farming in summer. He rarely left the WWII area, except for medical checkups. Locals said you might see him at the village market, carrying a sack of potatoes and greeting with his familiar nod. No one ever heard him mention the name, White Death, the world had given him. To Simo, it was just a name others assigned, not something he wished to keep. In his later years, he moved to a small nursing home in western Finland. There, he kept his habit of rising early and sitting by the window watching snowfall. Nurses said he was very polite, spoke little, but always looked people straight in the eye when greeting them. Though his face bore scars, his gaze still carried the calm of someone who understood the fragility of time. He lived to 96, passing away on April 1, 2002. A quiet departure, exactly as he had lived after the war. But his legacy was anything but quiet. Military historians consider Simo Häyhä the most effective sniper in modern history, with over 500 confirmed kills in just 105 days, a record no 21st century sniper has surpassed. What made him exceptional was not only the number, but how he achieved it. Pure skill, discipline, and perfect harmony with the harsh, cold environment where he grew up. That legacy reflects the man himself, a typical Finn of the old generation, reserved, practical. Everything he did stemmed from a simple philosophy: when faced with hardship, act. He never spoke of courage, but his silence was what set him apart. He never spoke of fear, yet everyone understood he had faced it every day at Kollaa. He never claimed to be a hero, but what he left behind has been studied by entire generations of soldiers. Military experts analyze his tactics, from holding snow in his mouth to hide breath, to using iron sights, to constant relocation, and recognize that his victories came not from luck or physical strength. They came from absolute focus and discipline that only someone who lived beside harsh nature for decades could master. And from silence, the silence that followed him from childhood in the forest to his final days. When asked what the secret was to being a great sniper, he simply said, "Understand the forest." That statement became part of his legacy. In the years after his death, military delegations, journalists, and scholars visited WWII. They wanted to see where the man began, where snow covers narrow paths, where silence is as thick as fog. Some say the snow in WWII falls differently, lighter, finer, melting faster when breath touches it. Perhaps that is just imagination, but perhaps it is because his image remains there, in the white forests where he learned patience, where he lay for hours waiting for a deer, where his breath dissolved into cold air unseen by anyone. And when people speak of Simo Häyhä's legacy, they do not speak only of the targets he eliminated. They speak of discipline, quietude, and how he turned silence into a weapon. In the end, his story concludes with a reflection similar to the original script. War did not grant him power. It only took his youth and left a rifle in the hands of a silent farmer. But that very silence, the thing the enemy underestimated, became the sharpest blade. If you want to hear more historical stories told in this authentic and deeply emotional way, please follow the channel right now so you don't miss out. Every subscription from you is the motivation for me to keep bringing these forgotten stories back into the light.